So welcome and thank you for taking the time to join today's Sharing Meetings Like a Productivity Ninja Skill Booster. Got a really interesting 25 minutes ahead of us. I will have some time for questions. So let's kick off. I'll introduce myself. Feel free to take a photo. I will bring this up at the back, but this is my contact details. Feel free to get in touch with me on this or any other Productivity Ninja content. And also, we'd love you to follow us on Facebook or Instagram to keep the productivity flowing. So our purpose, when starting any meeting, particularly as a chair, it's really, really important to start with purpose. Today's purpose, before I give you introduction to Think Productive, I know a lot of you are familiar with this, but for those that aren't, I wanted to set up the purpose for today. Which is, it's quite a short session. We call it a skill booster to give you some tips and practical ways on the subject, but it's an express session. So it's got a specific focus on the chairperson aspect of the meeting. A little bit of background for those of you that don't know. Think Productive are a global training company founded by Allcott, who wrote the book that you can see on the screen there. If you haven't read it yet, it's a wonderful and very relevant and timely book to help worry less, achieve more, and love what you do. And obviously this helps us in our work, but clearing your inbox, as I know many of you are aware that we help people with, is probably the best thing I've ever done for both my personal stress management as well as obviously work and just being organised. But there's some amazing tips in the book, and I'd encourage you to get a copy if you don't. So I run Productivity Ninja workshops as a ninja, and we run them right across Australia and other countries in the region to support both organisations and individuals achieve the 3 objectives that you're looking at, and not hating going to work, particularly in COVID, right? Obviously, you can't be at your best all the time now. It's really stressful, but at least not hating what you do and making the most of it. So that's one of our mission statements. All right, so as I say, feel free to put any comments in the chat. I'll look at that every couple of slides and answer any questions you have. But this is the agenda. So for the next 20 minutes or so, I've already talked about the purpose. So next I'm going to set the scene for meetings to get optimal results. Help you sort of really achieve that as a chair. I'll share our toolkit for meetings with you, which includes a model called the 40-20-40, which is a really cool way to change the way we put our energy into making meetings effective. We're then going to go through a checklist, which is a 3-part checklist as a chairperson that will give you a really comprehensive overview for making your meeting successful. I'll be sharing that with you after the meeting as well. So you'll get a follow-up email with this checklist in it. So you probably won't even be able to see all the content on some of the screens, but I'm going to call out parts of it today. So don't need to take pictures or notes. You will get that later. Then in our wrap up, I'll summarise what we've covered, answer any remaining questions. I'm happy to stay on for a little bit after the 30 minutes if anyone has any other follow-up questions. So as I say, you'll get a follow-up email immediately after this session with the recording and also a link to download the full copy of the meetings chair list for a chair. It may go to spam, so that's why I'm mentioning it, just so you look out for it in the next hour or so. So if we're good with that, let's move to setting the scene. So why do we need to even talk about being a good chairperson? Well, why is it important? Many of you have seen this slide before, but let's think about it in terms of meetings and in terms of chairing meetings. We live in a world that's got busy brain. Everyone's really busy, very hard to get people to focus, get ourselves to focus, but particularly during meetings. And there's a lot of meeting fatigue, Zoom fatigue, Teams fatigue at the moment. So it's particularly hard to get people's attention. It's talked about in the media as the attention economy, which is something you'll probably see in a marketing or advertising sense. And when we're leading meetings, really important to be thinking, how do I get attention? How can I be a better chairperson to keep more attention? It's if people start smiling at a certain point in the meeting, I heard a story once of they might be thinking of something much more pleasurable in the meeting itself. So they might be looking at you, but getting their attention is really difficult, particularly on Zoom. So if we encourage, not demand, but encourage more attention from people, the better the meeting, and more importantly, the better the result. And we're going to talk about not just the meeting itself today. So let's talk about what we're here to discuss. How can you be a good chair, or a great chair even? So what makes a good chairperson? There's a really nice quote from Graham and Hayley, who wrote the book How to Fix Meetings. And we now have a workshop that some of you might be aware of. Graham's the founder of Think Productive, and Hayley's one of our productivity ninjas in the UK that does great work for us in Europe and the UK. And the quote talks about the aim, which is designing and leading meetings that result in change or agreement and getting stuff done. So we're going to help you with this by creating a toolkit and adding to your toolkit that obviously you already have, and what's available to you to be a really great chairperson. And remember, if you're not doing these things today, or you're time poor. So one of the things in the book that Graham and Hayley have talked about is the idea of the yin and the yang of meetings. So many of us have seen this symbol, but let's think about it in the context of chairing meetings. So of course we need a little bit of sensitivity and we need a bit of structure, but not one or the other. So the yin is the softer listening, the openness, the reflecting. We need aspects of all of that in our meetings, particularly listening. The yang is where we get into deep content and we dive into specific issues, we plan. We talk about the future. It's a much more focused area, which obviously some meetings can be all about the yang and not about the yin, or vice versa. So we really need to be cognizant of both of these aspects that are flowing through the meeting when we're the chairperson. So thinking about this image hopefully can help. And as I say, you'll get a recording of this, but feel free to take a picture if you want. So as I said, a lot of us have seen this symbol over and over, and we get it. But it's interesting, there's one nuance to this that I just learned about, which is this seed that's in the middle. So when you look at the yin side, where you can see there's a tiny seed of yang in the middle, and vice versa, a tiny seed of yin in the yang. So that's where this is actually quite powerful. That it's about balance. That's why it's not just a clear cut down the middle. It flows through each other. And you know, in meetings, obviously the way they ebb and flow, we need to maybe think about this to help us get through the meeting. But also when we're planning the meeting, think about how we're going to plan for a meeting that has the yin and the yang. And I'm going to share with you in the toolkit as well some ideas that can definitely help you with the planning. I mentioned the model that's coming up. So have a little bit of this in the agenda that we're setting out, and also in the emotion, or the way we chair the meeting, the method, if you like, that we chair the meeting. So you can of course apply this to all of your work. When we have too many meetings in the diary, where maybe listening to others doesn't give space for doing the deep work, which obviously we cover in our other material, how you can actually keep that yin and yang within your own brain and manage it for yourself. But you can apply this to all of your meetings, having that balance of listening, reflecting, making sure people feel valued and heard, we know is so important. And again, you know, using, with Zoom, it's even more difficult. You might see them looking at you, but you know, do they feel heard? Do they want to say something? Or do they disagree? So balancing that with the things that we're probably much better at, which is structure, focus, getting a decision, and having actions to move forward. That's obviously still really important. So the book talks about the dangers of having too much of one and not enough of the other, but also you know, whether you don't have enough distinction between the two and you end up doing both shallow listening and shallow work. So hopefully you've got a bit out of that. And again, feel free to type in any questions or comments, anything you'd love to share on this into the chat. Now, the next tool I want to share is this 40-20-40 model that I mentioned at the start. It's something we really love talking about, and it's so important to think about not just the meeting, but the before, as well as the during, and the follow-up. That's actually the reason why it's weighted more heavily in the before and the follow-up, because they often get neglected. And we know that, and it's very easy to do once you move on to the next meeting or you have back-to-back meetings. So we know we focus on the meeting itself during the meeting. We know it's easy not to invest the time before and definitely after. But there's ways to do this. So we're going to spend time talking about each section, and hopefully we'll get some really good tips from the checklist. So think about these three things as the chairperson. So let's move to the before the meeting. As I mentioned, I'm going to share this checklist with you in the follow-up email. So feel free just to watch the screen and you'll get the content later. So the first piece here is to make sure we've got a really clear purpose. We've invited the right people and the invitation's compelling. So people turn up with the right state of mind and they are aware of what we're going to cover and prepared. And we can kick off at a much higher level. Have information provided to attendees before the meeting, and also make clear why you're providing that information and what's expected. So you might have a document that could be a presentation. So are you going to present that in the meeting? Do you expect people to read it? Make it really clear. We're all at fault of not doing that well enough. Definitely include times and allow 10 minutes, even at the start and the end. It sounds like a lot, but that's your wiggle room to make it really effective. And we know we want to connect with people, and we'll talk about that. And we definitely know we need to not run out of time so that we get out of the meeting what we need. I'm just going to pause because I got not distracted. I am watching the chat. So thank you, Alicia. Does that mean for every hour-long meeting you need to do 4 hours of pre and post work? Great question. Definitely not. And I think it's probably not a matter of that much time, as in the 40-20-40. It's more the amount of time you focus. So what the recommendation would be is that if you're putting 100% of your time into preparing for the meeting, you prepare the agenda and the purpose and think about the way you're going to run it, but you do twice as much on the before as setting it up, and the follow-up. You allow time for the follow-up. So for an hour's meeting, I'd expect probably 10 minutes to think about the actual meeting. You do meetings all the time, that's the easy bit. And maybe 20 minutes to think about the before and 20 minutes to think about the after. So yeah, great question. And yeah, please feel free to challenge me on that and have any other questions. That's great. Thank you very much, Alicia. So yeah, so we're not just jamming everything into the meeting. We need that space for that 10 minutes at the start and 10 minutes at the end. Now, if it's a 30-minute meeting, and by the way, one best practice that we talk about and we implement is 25-minute meetings. So you can schedule your calendar for a standard meeting to be not 30 or 60 minutes. You can schedule it to be 50 minutes or 25 minutes. That's a really cool thing to do and get used to. But that's sort of a better meetings tip there. But if it's a 30-minute meeting, maybe you only have 5 minutes at the start and 5 minutes at the end. But I'm going to cover a lot in 20 minutes on this skill booster. And we didn't start right on the hour. I didn't want to rush the start, and I will definitely have some time at the end to cover off anything that comes up, and stop for questions, great questions like this. So hopefully that helps, just with the 40-20-40 rule, and also having that wiggle room. But what's really important is the purpose. Okay. So as many of you know, we always include activities in our workshop. So I'm going to ask you to think about the purpose now on this short webinar, only a minute or two. What I'd love you to do, please, is just spend 2 minutes or 30 seconds creating a purpose statement. So think about a meeting you've got coming up and just write a sentence on a short purpose statement. Some tips are, you can use verbs like discuss, decide, learn, identify, agreed. Yeah, if you can just take a moment, I'd love you to put it into the chat, and I'm going to share that with you if people share. Great. Thanks, Matt. Okay, here's a really good one. By the end of our team meeting, everyone will be clear on the goals for the week ahead and feel motivated towards them. That's fantastic, Matt, because you've got both the yin and the yang clearly in the agenda. That definitely would motivate me to turn up and prepare. Excellent example. So if anyone has any others to share, oh, thanks, Rachel. Identify and define issues that impact provision of information to employment agencies. Excellent. So coming to your meeting, I know that I want to think about my issues and I want to think about the subject of that information. Excellent. And it's so powerful. Just putting, if there's one thing you can do in your invitation, putting that purpose. I use the word purpose in bold and put that right at the top, above the dial-in information. Excellent. Thanks, Matt. All right. So one more. Thank you, Liz. The purpose of this meeting is to review the semester 1 TPD data, identify which casuals are performing work on a regular basis. Great. You're coming to that meeting pretty prepared. Thank you, guys, for sharing. That's really helpful. Awesome. I'm going to move on, but feel free to share, and I won't call out any more comments, but we'll have them in the chat for everyone to get some thoughts out of. All right, so we're on to the checklist that I've been talking about. So as I say, we're not going to go through all this in detail. You will get this in the follow-up email, but this is to show you there's a lot of detail. So the 40-20-40, there's plenty to do to prepare that 10 minutes, if you like, before of setting up before the meeting. So there's about 10 different things in it that you've got to think about as you prepare your meeting. So break times, even if it's an hour, having a little activity like I did, just so powerful. And layout, and of course with the virtual meetings, I was on 20 minutes before this session. I was ready, but I did everything but share my slides. So thank you, Matt, for reminding me. So just be prepared and that type of thing. All my comments I wanted to put in the chat, I had in my clipboard and ready to go, things like that. So just a good checklist that can help you. So let's move on to during the meeting. Here's some tools, and I am going to go into a couple of these in detail. So there's a lot of things to think about. Again, this is a skill booster, not a full workshop, but we're going to pick out a couple of things here. So I'm going to pick out the 4 Ps and talk about that in some detail. I'm also going to talk about scripts, which is a really interesting way of being prepared and not just hoping it'll come to you, but have things maybe written down or recorded. So there's a lot of things here to make sure we can make the meeting successful. Again, that's where there's the 20 in the 40-20-40. So the 4 Ps, really cool tool. It's a really nice framework to use to design great meetings. Very simple, like every good framework. It just frames your meeting by specifying at the start, reiterating what the purpose is. People may not have read the calendar invite or an agenda. That obviously happens. So just reiterate the purpose, then have a plan, which is basically like the agenda for what's the timings, how will this meeting go, is it set out, are we going to break out into rooms? Just let people what we're going to be doing step by step. And obviously you can check in to ask people, is there anything else you'd like to do, and get their buy-in as you start the meeting. With protocol, that's more relating to the use of phones. I've got mine on silent today. Laptops, particularly in the virtual world, cameras, of course. A best practice might be have the cameras on when you're having an activity, but let people turn them off if someone's speaking, to get away from camera fatigue. Just things like that. Is there a car park? Are you using chat, which obviously is great for the car park? And any other protocol you've got for the session. It's amazing what comes up when you do this. When we meet as ninjas, quite often we'll say, I might be expecting an urgent client call, or there might be something happening personally. It just, it really helps you connect with the person in an authentic way when they're fully present because they've shared that information with you, for instance. So lastly, but not least, is the people. Really good to check in, because things might have changed since you planned this meeting, right? And people might be away. There's so many variables here. So just asking yourself and asking the group potentially, do we have the right people here in this meeting today to achieve our purpose? Comes back to purpose. Because if we don't, we might need to delay or in fact, reschedule, which is fine. Just tricky to get time in people's diary, but that's honouring everyone's time. I'm a big believer in starting on time as well. People honour people that have turned up. So you're actually taking people that are there ready to start the meeting through the 4 Ps. So great way to start a meeting, great way to make sure everyone's on the same page. And as a chairperson, coming back to it, you don't need to have it visually displayed, but coming back to it if you feel the meeting's going off track. Really good way to do that. Now, the next tip I'd love to share with you today from the checklist is scripts. It's a really good thing to have in your back pocket as a chair. So if you want to start achieving something different in the meeting, move things on, or just coming back to the purpose, here's some ideas that you can use, but feel free obviously to make your own and put into your own words. Many people already use the tactic to move things on really effectively by saying, I'm conscious of time. I use it, it's easy. I don't think it ever gets stale. I'm conscious of time. So as a chairperson, subtle way of saying move on. Let's take around 10 minutes, like I did with the exercise, is a really good way to set a guideline for how long this should take. Obviously that varies from person to person, but having that guideline in there is pretty key. I think this covers it, and we'll move on. Is a great way to share that you think people have said what they need to say, and allow people to add before you do move on, having that use of pause. I'm going to pause now and have a sip. So absolutely powerful. So there's some really good scripts in here. And depending on your purpose, some might be more useful, but having a think about that, having them in your back pocket, in your book, or pasted up on the wall behind your screen is a great thing I do from time to time. So I'll just pause here. If anyone has any questions or comments, we're doing great for time. Let me know. Okay, so there's lots of things to think about to make sure you're ready for the meeting and for during the meeting. And also, we now want to focus on probably the most challenging part is after the meeting when people have moved on. So it's a really important stage, and this is where the rubber hits the road, right? Did the meeting we just had have the impact that we were after? So what we want to do here is set expectations, make sure we know what the next steps are. Thinking about this again before you run the meeting and your planning is critical. Make sure there's good actions captured in the meeting. Not necessarily all actions are created equal, so you might want to weight them. But follow-up is so important. If we're the chairperson, we might need to follow up, or obviously we might need to delegate it. Quite often you can find the person that's going to take ownership. If anyone was disengaged or absent, they might need to be followed up. It's actually our role as the chair, unless we delegate it, to connect with those people. And of course, without physical meetings now, we can't really do this as you're walking out of the meeting, right? So another good thing to think about in times of lockdown Zoom and Teams. So we really want to review the success of the meeting and definitely ask the question, did we achieve the purpose? So simple question, but really probably the biggest thing to do to check in at the end. If it's no, what are we going to do? How do we get the feedback as to why? So I'm going to be asking you all for feedback, 30-second feedback after this, which is obviously critical, as a lot of you know. So really important to build this into your cycle of meetings as well. So once again, in the checklist, we're going to be sharing some really good things here to think about after the meeting, and you'll get this checklist in the follow-up email. So that's it. I'm 1 minute over what I planned, but that's why I've allowed 5 minutes at the end. What we've covered today is the purpose, setting the scene. How do you become a good chair? What can help you become a great chair? The 40-20-40 toolkit and the checklist. And now we're wrapping up. So as I say, we're going to be emailing you now with a follow-up, both with the copy of the meetings chair list to download, but also with the recording. And I'm going to stay on for a little bit now, but just as many of you know, it's a skill booster. So these are some of the meetings that we have. Thank you, Terry. And before you go, I'm just going to, I'll come back to my slide, but can I just put up the survey so I can get you out before 9:30? And I'm actually going to paste it in the chat. Thanks, Tracy. If you can just take a minute to answer like 4 questions, that would be fantastic. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Heather. And yeah, great to see you through the chat at least. And good luck today. Yeah, we hope to see you on the next Skill Booster. Thanks, Cassie. So I'm going to hang around if anyone has any questions, but otherwise, enjoy your day. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Rachel. Cheers, Liz. My pleasure. That's great, Sandra. Glad to hear you picked up some tips.